On March 17, 1984, the young couple Paulo Roberto Gomez, 23 years old, and Sylvia Regina Alves, 21 years old, disappeared without a trace in the city of Santos on the coast of Sao Paulo. University students and engaged for 2 years. Paulo was studying civil engineering, while Sylvia was studying journalism. Both were known for their dedication to their studies and the stable relationship they had maintained since high school. That Saturday night, with a mild temperature of 234 Torridre and clear skies, typical of the end of summer in Santos, the couple had gone out to dinner at the Cantinho do Mar restaurant, located in Ponta de Praia. According to the waiter who served them, Marcelo Soares, they seemed happy and talked animatedly about their plans for the wedding, scheduled for December that same year. The last time they were seen alive was at 10:47 p.m. when they paid the bill and left the establishment. Paulo's navy blue Beetle, license plate BWS 4732, was found 2 days later in the Santos bus station parking lot, with the keys in the ignition and no signs of violence or struggle. Sylvia's purse was on the passenger seat, containing all her documents, money, and even an engagement ring she usually kept in her purse when washing her hands in public places. This detail immediately intrigued investigators. Why would someone who planned to flee or voluntarily leave behind valuables and personal documents? Paulo's parents, Roberto and Margarita Gomez, only noticed he was missing on Monday, March 19th, when their son failed to show up for a family lunch that took place every Sunday. Concerned after several unsuccessful attempts to contact him, they went to their son's apartment in the Gonzaga neighborhood. The place was in perfect order, with no signs that Paul had planned a trip or extended outing. My son would never fail to let me know if he was going to travel. He was extremely responsible and organized. I had even left the books I intended to study for a test on Monday on the kitchen table. Roberto Gomez stated in his initial statement to the police. Sylvia's family, who lived in Praia Grande, a city neighboring Santos, was also alerted that same day. Her father, Carlos Alves, a respected local businessman, immediately contacted his contacts and, along with Paulo's family, filed a police report at the 3rd police station in Santos at 7:05 p.m. that Monday. The first searches began the following morning with civil police teams, visiting hospitals, health centers, and even the Forensic Institute, assuming the couple had been in an accident. At the same time, police searched the area around the Port of Santos and the bus station, where the car was found. Posters with the couple's photos were distributed throughout Baixada Santista. The police chief in charge of the case, Dr. Augusto Mendonça, told the press on the 3rd day of the search, "We are considering all hypotheses, from an accident to a kidnapping. The fact that there was no evidence of violence in the vehicle does not eliminate the possibility of foul play. It merely indicates that, if that was the case, it occurred elsewhere." The desperate families hired a private investigator, Josias Ramos, a former police officer with 15 years of experience in missing persons cases. Ramos immediately identified a disturbing element. The bus station security cameras, which could have recorded the vehicle's arrival at the parking lot, were mysteriously turned off between 11 p.m. on Saturday and 5 a.m. on Sunday morning. If you want to follow more cases like this, which shake up society as a whole and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any investigation. The first weeks after Paulo and Sylvia's disappearance were marked by intense police activity. The main initial line of investigation centered on the possibility of kidnapping, a practice that, unfortunately, was not uncommon in Brazil in the 1980s, the final period of the military dictatorship. However, the fact that no ransom demand was made weakened this hypothesis. The police chief Mendonça appointed investigator Elio Ribeiro to lead the team dedicated exclusively to the case. Ribeiro, known for his meticulousness, began by reconstructing the couple's final steps. Through witnesses, he established that, after leaving the restaurant, Paulo and Sylvia were briefly seen at a nearby newsstand, where they bought a magazine about interior design, further evidence that they were planning their future wedding. A gas station attendant on Avenida Ana Costa claimed to have filled up the Beetle around 11:15 p.m. According to him, the couple seemed relaxed and mentioned taking the road to São Vicente, a neighboring city where a friend of the couple lived. This was the final confirmation of their whereabouts that night. Meanwhile, Detective Josias Ramos was pursuing a different line of investigation. He discovered that Paulo, 3 weeks before his disappearance, had witnessed a fight between a Navy officer and a civilian near the port. The incident had left one man hospitalized with serious injuries. Paulo gave a statement identifying the attacker, a fact that, according to Ramos, could have having put him at risk. It was a complicated final period of the military regime. Testifying against an officer was not a trivial matter. Ramos explained in his personal notes, later attached to the inquiry. This line of investigation gained momentum when it was discovered that the officer in question, Lieutenant Carlos Eduardo Vieira, had been transferred to Rio de Janeiro just 3 days after the couple's disappearance. Police questioned Lieutenant Vieira in April 1984. He denied any involvement, presenting an apparently solid alibi. He was at a party at the Santos Naval Base on the night of his disappearance, with several other military personnel who confirmed their presence. However, there was an unconfirmed 3-hour window in his alibi between the and late-night cuffs. Another line of investigation emerged when a college colleague of Sylvia, Marina Goncalves, revealed that the young woman had commented on a journalistic project she was developing related to irregularities in construction of the Municipal Urbano Caldera Stadium, popularly known as Vila Belmiro, Casa dos Santos Football Club. According to Marina, Sylvia had mentioned compromising documents that she planned to include in her report. She was excited and apprehensive at the same time. She said it would be her final project, something that could launch her career in investigative journalism. Marina declared, this information led investigators in a new direction. The stadium renovation, which began in 1982, was the subject of rumors of overbilling and embezzlement. The construction company responsible, Progresso e Engenharia, had connections with influential local politicians and was run by Arnaldo Meneses, a businessman known for his ties to public authorities. Meneses was questioned in May 1984 and denied knowing Sylvia or any journalistic investigation into his work. He provided documents that, according to him, proved the integrity of the process. However, a search of Sylvia's apartment revealed notes about meetings with construction company employee, identified only as JP, on February 22 and March 7, 1984. The investigation faced significant obstacles. Key witnesses refused to speak or change their statements. The bus station manager, who initially claimed to have seen a young couple being approached by 2 men in the parking lot, later returned, saying he might be mistaken. The case gained national attention when the television program Linha Dorita presented it in June 1984. Hundreds of calls were received, most from people claiming to have seen the couple in various parts of the country, from Rio Grande do Sul to the Northeast. Each lead was investigated, but none were confirmed. In August 1984, information emerged that the couple might have been seen in Asunción, Paraguay, supposedly living under new identities. A team was sent to the neighboring country, but after 2 weeks of investigation, it was concluded that they were a different Brazilian couple, with only a physical resemblance. Meanwhile, the families lived in endless anguish. Roberto Gomez, Paulo's father, suffered a heart attack in September that year, which the doctor attributed to the emotional stress of the situation. Sylvia's mother, Dulce Alves, fell into a deep depression and was hospitalized several times. A turning point occurred in November 1984, when a fisherman found a men's watch near Ilha das Palmas, in Santos. The object was identified by the family as belonging to Paulo, a gift from his father for his college entrance exam. This discovery reignited searches in the coastal region, but nothing else was found. The case gradually began to cool. Chief Inspector Mendonça was transferred to Sao Paulo in January 1985, and Investigator Ribeiro took on other cases. Only Detective Ramos, hired by the families, continued actively seeking answers, even with increasingly limited resources. In March 1985, on the first anniversary of the disappearance, the police officially reclassified the case as unsolved, although technically it remained open. The families held a memorial mass for the couple at Santos Cathedral, an event that drew hundreds of people and briefly revived the interest of the press. It was during this period that an anonymous statement emerged in a letter sent to the police station. The sender, who identified himself only as someone who knows the truth, claimed that the couple's disappearance was linked to secret boxes hidden in the foundations of the stadium. The letter, initially considered the work of a mythomaniac, was shelved without further investigation. On January 12, 1992, almost 8 years after its disappearance, the Urbano Caldera Stadium was undergoing further renovation. During excavation work to expand a visiting locker room, workers came across something unusual: a sealed area beneath the concrete containing 12 metal boxes measuring approximately 70 by 40 centimeters, all properly welded and without any external identification. The engineer in charge of the project, Ricardo Noguera, immediately notified the club's management. Intrigued by the discovery, Santos FC's president at the time, Miguel Rosito, authorized the opening of one of the boxes, suspecting it might contain historical club documents or even old trophies stored and forgotten during previous renovations. The surprise was enormous when the first box revealed accounting documents from the construction company Progreso Ingeniería, dated 1982 to 1984. Among them were receipts of payments to local politicians and forged invoices that evidenced overbilling for the stadium's construction. Upon discovering this, Rosito immediately contacted the authorities. Chief of Police Claudio Fernandez, assigned to investigate the case, ordered the opening of the remaining boxes. 11 of them contained more compromising documents, including cassette tapes with recordings of meetings between businessmen and politicians openly discussing corruption schemes. However, it was the 12th box that caused a shock that reverberated throughout the country. Upon opening, it revealed human remains in an advanced state of decomposition. Despite the deterioration, some personal belongings were preserved. A woman's watch engraved with the initials SRA, a partially legible student ID card in the name of Paulo Roberto, and a diary with entries ending on March 16, 1984. The preliminary forensic examination identified the remains as belonging to a man and a woman, both young. Forensic examiner Dr. Eduardo Pessoa observed that the bodies had multiple skull fractures, consistent with blunt force trauma, likely the cause of death. Subsequent dental analysis confirmed. These were Paulo Roberto Gomez and Sylvia Regina Alves. It was as if time had stopped, said Roberto Gomez, Paulo's father, upon learning of the discovery. At 67 years old and still grief-stricken by his son's disappearance, he added, "We always knew, deep down, that they hadn't run away or started a new life. It was simply inconceivable." With the reopening of the case, Sylvia's notes found years earlier in her apartment took on new meaning. Cross-referencing this information with the documents found in the boxes, investigators were able to identify JB as João Paulo Silveira, an engineer at Progreso who oversaw construction on the stadium. Silveira, who had left Brazil in 1986 to live in Spain, was located in Barcelona and extradited in 1993. During his interrogation, Silveira broke the silence that had lasted for almost a decade. According to him, Sylvia had gained access to information about the corruption scheme through an administrative employee at the construction company. On the night of her disappearance, she and Paulo were lured to the stadium with the promise of access to more documents. Arnaldo was furious when he learned that documents had been leaked. He ordered us to scare the girl, just to make her abandon the report. But things got out of hand. Silveira confessed. According to his account, Sylvia and Paulo were met at the stadium by him and Marcelo Brandeo, a security guard for a construction company and former military police officer. When they realized they were going to deliver a full report, rather than just preliminary notes, a heated argument ensued. Brandeo attacked Paulo, who was trying to protect Sylvia. In the confusion, both were fatally struck. It all happened very quickly. Suddenly, they were there on the ground, dead. Arnaldo was contacted immediately and instructed us to hide the bodies and all the compromising documents in boxes that would be poured the next day during the final phase of the renovation. Silveira reported. The testimony directly implicated Arnaldo Meneses, Lieutenant Vieira, who had apparently been bribed to hinder the initial investigations, and 3 other politicians from the region. Recordings found in the boxes corroborated the accusations, revealing discussions about how to resolve the interfering couple's problem. Leave a comment and never give up on the truth if you believe that all missing people deserve to be found. With the new evidence and confessions obtained, the public prosecutor's office filed a formal complaint against those involved in May 1993. Arnaldo Meneses, then 64 years old and still influential in the construction sector, was preventively arrested at his mansion in Guarujá. João Paulo Silveira was charged with double qualified homicide and concealment of a corpse, becoming a defendant and confessing. Marcelo Brandão, located in the interior Paraná, where he lived under a false name, was also detained. Former Lieutenant Carlos Eduardo Vieira, who had reached the rank of captain and was about to retire, was arrested in Rio de Janeiro. His participation, according to investigations, was fundamental in the initial cover-up, using his influence to divert investigations and intimidate witnesses. Among the documents found in the boxes were receipts for substantial payments in his name. The trial, which began in October 1993, became one of the most publicized in Brazilian judicial history. For 3 weeks, the Santos court received dozens of witnesses and experts. Paulo and Silvia's families watched every minute of the sessions, often emotionally shaken by the details revealed. The prosecutor, Dr. Cecilia Braganca, in charge of prosecution, presented a detailed reconstruction of the events. According to her, the crime had been premeditated since Meneses discovered the journalistic investigation. It wasn't an accident, nor a scare that got out of control. It was an execution designed to silence 2 young lives who were simply seeking the truth, he argued in his final accusation. Meneses' defense, led by renowned lawyer Joaquim Torres, attempted to shift all the blame to Brandão and Silveira, claiming that their client had never ordered any violence and that he had only been informed of the facts after they had occurred. However, the recordings found directly contradicted this version. In one of the most damning tapes, dated March 19, 1984, Meneses' voice could be clearly heard saying, "The problem has been permanently solved. No one will find them where they are now. We will proceed as planned with the concrete pouring tomorrow." After deliberating for just 6 hours, the jury found all defendants guilty. Arnaldo Meneses was sentenced to 36 years in prison for ordering the murders and for active corruption. João Paulo Silveira received 24 years with a partial reduction for his cooperation. Marcelo Brandão, considered the direct perpetrator of the deaths, was sentenced to 32 years. Former Captain Vieira received 18 years for participating in the cover-up and obstruction of justice. 3 local politicians were also indicted and subsequently convicted of passive corruption and involvement in the cover-up of the crimes. The corruption scheme revealed by the investigations resulted in the cancellation of several public contracts with Progresso Engenharia, which ultimately went bankrupt in 1995. For the families, the conviction of those responsible brought an ambiguous feeling. "No punishment can bring our children back," declared Carlos Alves, Silvia's father. "But knowing the truth and seeing justice served allows us to at least bring closure to this painful chapter of our lives." Paulo and Silvia's bodies were finally buried in April 1993, after forensic examinations were completed. The funeral, held at the Piqueta Cemetery in Santos, brought together family, friends, and hundreds of people moved by the case. Several media outlets covered the ceremony, transforming it into a symbol of the fight for justice and truth. The case had a significant impact on Brazilian legislation. In 1996, the Paulo and Silvia Law was passed. Law number 9-26896, which increased penalties for crimes of concealment of a corpse and established stricter protocols for investigating disappearances. Furthermore, the case influenced the creation of specialized missing persons police stations in several Brazilian states. The Urbano Caldeira Stadium underwent a complete structural overhaul after the discovery, and a plaque, a memorial to the couple, was installed near the site where the boxes were found. Every year on March 17th, the date of their disappearance, a simple ceremony is held at the site, keeping Paulo and Silvia's memory alive. In 2004, 20 years after their disappearance, a documentary titled 12 Boxes, The Concrete Truth, was produced by TV Cultura, detailing the case and interviewing investigators, family members, and even João Paulo Silveira, who gave an interview from the prison where he was serving his sentence. Roberto Gomes, Paolo's father, died in 1998 without seeing full justice served, as Arnaldo Meneses had obtained several procedural benefits that significantly reduced his effective sentence. Meneses was released in 2005 after serving only 12 years, thanks to pardons and sentence progressions. He died in 2009, never admitting full guilt for the crimes. Carlos and Dulce Alves, Silvia's parents, founded the Brazilian Association for the Search and Defense of Children in 1995. Desaparecidas, Arent A. BBDCD, an organization that assists families in similar situations. The organization has contributed to the resolution of dozens of disappearances cases throughout Brazil. Over the years, the Paulo and Silvia case has become a reference for law, journalism, and criminology students across the country. Beyond its legal and investigative significance, it symbolized Brazil's transition to democracy and the challenges faced by those seeking to expose the truth during this turbulent period. In 2014, 30 years after the disappearance, the National Truth Commission included the case in its final report, recognizing it as a politically motivated crime, even though it occurred in the final stages of the military regime. This classification was based on evidence that the corruption scheme surrounding the stadium construction involved high-ranking military personnel and politicians linked to the regime. Marina Goncalves, Silvia's college friend, who provided crucial information for the journalistic investigation, became an award-winning investigative reporter. In 2010, she published a book in the latest report. The story of Silvia Regina and Paolo Roberto became a bestseller and was adapted into a television miniseries in 2015. The Santos School of Social Communication, where Silvia was a student, created the Silvia Regina Award for Investigative Journalism in 1995, awarded annually to the best final paper in the field. The award encourages students to pursue journalism committed to truth and social justice, values that inspired the young woman in her tragic quest. The discoveries made during the investigation led to a thorough review of other public works carried out by the construction company Progresso. Between 1994 and 1997, a task force from the public prosecutor's office investigated 23 projects executed by the company between 1980 and 1984. The results were alarming. In 19 of them, evidence of overbilling, use of inferior materials, and payment of bribes was found. João Paulo Silveira, who collaborated extensively with the investigations, was promoted to a semi-open prison regime. In 2005, during his time in prison, he earned a law degree through a distance learning program for inmates. After his parole in 2008, he devoted himself to lecturing at universities on the dangers of corruption and the devastating consequences that poor decisions can have on people's lives. Marcelo Brandao, considered the direct perpetrator of the murders, has never shown remorse. In 2007, during a riot at the Presidente Bernardes Penitentiary, he was murdered by other inmates. According to reports, his death was linked to internal disputes within the prison, with no direct connection to the couple's case. Former Captain Carlos Eduardo Vieira served 10 years of his 18-year sentence and was released in 2003. He moved to the interior of Goiás, where he lived in prison until his death in 2018. In a 2015 interview with a documentary filmmaker, Vieira partially admitted his involvement. "I didn't kill anyone, but I acknowledge that my omission and subsequent actions allowed the real killers to remain unpunished for so long. It's something I'll have to live with for the rest of my life." In 2017, Santos Football Club decided to completely renovate the area where the boxes were found, transforming it into a memorial dedicated not only to Paulo and Silvia, but to all victims of violence and corruption in Brazil. The space, called the Memorial of Truth, includes a permanent exhibition on the case and hosts debates and lectures on ethics, investigative journalism, and combating corruption. When the case documents were finally released for public consultation in 2019, after the period of judicial secrecy, new details came to light, including the discovery of an attempted bribe against Detective Josias Ramos in 1984, just a few months after the investigation began. Ramos, who died in 2013, never publicly mentioned this episode, but he recorded in his personal diary that he refused an offer of a substantial sum to drop the case. Silvia's diary, partially preserved in the box along with hers, Mortal Remains, was published with the family's permission in 2020. The final pages reveal that she was aware of the risks she was taking. I know I'm messing with powerful people, but I can't back down now. Paolo tells me to be careful, but he doesn't understand that this could be the most important story of my life. Some truths need to come to light, no matter the cost. This phrase has become a motto for journalism students across Brazil, symbolizing a commitment to truth that should guide the profession, even in adverse situations. In numerous newsrooms across the country, these words can be found framed, reminding media professionals daily of the ultimate sacrifice of a young woman who believe in the transformative power of information. The Paolo and Silvia case continues to resonate in Brazilian society as a grim reminder of the dangers of institutionalized corruption and the importance of protecting those who seek to expose the truth, more than a crime of passion or motivated by immediate greed. It was a murder intended to silence voices that threatened to uncover a much larger scheme of systemic corruption. If you've watched this far, it's because you care. With these cases that mark families forever, leave a comment saying, "I watched this far so I can get to know you and know who truly cares about the search for the truth." On May 7th, 2023, during an excavation to install a new drainage system at the Urbano Caldera Stadium, workers made an unexpected discovery. A 13th box, similar to the 12 found in 1992, was concreted in an area distant from the original discovery. This box, apparently forgotten or deliberately separated from the others, brought to light new elements that reopened aspects of the case considered closed. Unlike the others, this box contained only documents, a set of cassette tapes not cataloged in previous investigations, photographs of the couple apparently taken under surveillance in the weeks before the crime, and a handwritten diary with handwriting identified as João Paulo Silveira's. The discovery was immediately reported to the authorities, and the material was sent for forensic analysis. The recordings, in better condition than the previous ones due to the special packaging in which they were stored, revealed conversations between Arnaldo Menezes and two prominent public figures who had never been linked to the case, a senator of the Republic and a businessman from the telecommunications sector. In the conversations dated February 1984, they discussed not only the corruption scheme in the stadium construction, but a much larger plan involving radio and television concessions throughout the state of Sao Paulo. Prosecutor Helena Martins, assigned to analyze the new material, explained, "This new evidence suggests that the corruption scheme Paolo and Silvia were about to expose was just the tip of the iceberg. The real reason for silencing them could be related to a much broader and more lucrative scheme of public concessions." Silveira's diary contained detailed entries about his participation in the crime and subsequent events. Contrary to his official testimony, in which he claimed the deaths were the result of a situation that got out of control, his personal notes indicated premeditation. A.M. Arnaldo Menezes, "It was clear today. The girl knows too much about the concessions and has contacts in the national press. She and her boyfriend need to be eliminated. Marcelo is preparing everything for Friday." The revelations in Silveira's diary shed new light on the case. In an entry dated March 15, 1984, 2 days before the disappearance, he wrote, "Confirmed for Saturday MB. Marcelo Brandao has already recognized the restaurant where they usually dine. We'll use the story of the extra documents as bait. The area in the stadium is already prepared. The box is ready. I'm assured that Lieutenant V will take care of any problems with the initial investigation." The photographic material found in the box revealed that the couple had been systematically followed for at least 3 weeks before the crime. There were photos of him leaving college, visiting family, and even in intimate moments at beaches and restaurants. Some of the images had notes on the back, such as confirmed routine. The discovery caused national commotion. The senator mentioned in the recordings, Eduardo Tavares, still active in Brazilian politics and holding a prominent position in the National Congress, vehemently denied any involvement in the case. Telecommunications businessman Roberto Alcântara, who died in 2017, had built a media empire that his heirs managed. Alcântara's family issued a statement, stating that any allegations of Mr. Alcântara's involvement in illicit activities are unfounded and will be treated legally as defamation of the memory of a businessman who contributed significantly to the development of communications in Brazil. The federal police opened an investigation into the new evidence, focusing specifically on the political connections that had remained hidden for nearly 4 decades. João Paulo Silveira, who was serving probation and working as a legal consultant in Curitiba, was again detained for questioning. Confronted with his own diary, Silveira finally admitted to complete premeditation of the crime. "I partially lied in my original statement. The deaths were not accidental. There was an elaborate plan to eliminate them both, because Sylvia had uncovered not only the corruption in the stadium construction, but also the bribery scheme in radio and TV concessions. This involved figures far more powerful than Arnaldo Meneses. Carlos Alves, Sylvia's father, then 84, appeared at the press conference called by the public prosecutor's office. With a choked but firm voice, he declared, "For 39 years we seek the complete truth. Each new revelation is like reliving the pain of loss, but also brings us a little closer to the justice my daughter and her fiancé deserve." The investigation into radio and television concessions revealed that between 1984 and 1988, Roberto Alcantara's business group obtained 17 concessions under suspicious conditions, laying the foundations for what would become one of the largest media conglomerates in the country. Documents found in the 13th box indicated that Sylvia had obtained evidence of illicit payments to authorities responsible for distributing concessions, including documents that directly linked Senator Tavares to the scheme. In a statement to the federal police, Alcantara's former secretary, Marissa Lopez, now 78 years old, confirmed the suspicions. It was common for Mr. Alcantara to meet with politicians behind closed doors. Once, in March 1984, he seemed very agitated after receiving a phone call. Heard, "If this story gets published, we're all finished." The next day, he suddenly traveled to Santos. Senator Tavares, pressured by new evidence and public outcry, resigned in June 2023, citing health reasons. 3 weeks later, he was found dead on his farm in interior Sao Paulo, apparently by suicide. A letter he left did not mention the case directly, but contained the phrase, "to sins that not even a lifetime of public service can erase." In September 2023, based on new evidence and additional testimony, the public prosecutor's office filed charges against 5 individuals who had not been implicated in the original investigations. 2 former directors of the Alcantara Company, a former employee of the Ministry of Communications, and 2 intermediaries who had directly participated in the illicit negotiations for concessions. The trial, which began in February 2024, rekindled national interest in the case. For 6 weeks, new witnesses were heard, including former stadium employees, who confirmed the existence of restricted areas during the 1984 construction work, where not even maintenance personnel could enter. One of them, Jose Ferreira, then a construction worker and now retired, revealed there was a fenced-off area near the locker rooms. One day, late at night, I saw some men carrying what appeared to be metal boxes into that space. When I asked my supervisor about it the next day, he sternly warned me not to ask questions if I want to keep my job. Prosecutor Helena Martins, in her closing argument, emphasized the extent of the conspiracy. This was not just a crime against 2 young lives full of promise. It was an attack on democracy, which was still in its infancy in our country, on freedom of the press, and on society's right to know the truth about how public funds and public concessions were manipulated. The defendant's defense tried to argue that after so many years, there was no way to establish a direct connection between their clients and the deaths, claiming that the crime had expired for everyone except the direct perpetrators. However, the Supreme Court's case law, which does not expire, was applied by the judge in charge. On March 17, 2024, exactly 40 years after Paulo and Sylvia's disappearance, the sentence was handed down, convicting all defendants. Sentences range from 12 to 24 years in prison, depending on the degree of each individual's involvement. João Paulo Silveira, having lied in his original statement despite partial cooperation, had his parole revoked and was sentenced to an additional 8 years in prison. During the sentencing, Judge Renato Cordero declared, "Justice, however delayed, is still justice." This case reminds us of the truth. No matter how much we try to solidify, bury, or hide it, eventually finds its way to light. Paulo Roberto Gomez and Sylvia Regina Alves did not die in vain. Their involuntary sacrifice exposed the inner workings of a corrupt system that hid behind a facade of corporate and political respectability. Roberto Alconder's family announced the creation of a reparations fund to support investigative journalism projects, an attempt to clear the company's name, which they claim was tarnished by the actions of its founder, unknown to the current managers. The fund, worth $30 million, included scholarships for journalism students in economically vulnerable situations. The illegally obtained concessions were reviewed by the Ministry of Communications, but due to the passage of time and multiple transfers of ownership over the decades, most remain with their current holders under commitment to invest in educational and cultural programming. In April 2024, the Sao Paulo State Legislative Assembly approved State Law 17.89220, 189,224, known as the Public Works Transparency Law, which established strict oversight mechanisms and required the online publication of all details of bids, contracts, and the execution of publicly funded projects in the state. For Dulce Alves, Sylvia's mother, now 88, the new revelations and convictions brought a sense of closure. I lived long enough to see the whole truth come to light. My daughter wanted to expose the corruption and give a voice to those who had none. Somehow, even after so long, she managed to do it. The Memorial of Truth at the Urbano Caldera Stadium was expanded to include a study center on press freedom and anti-corruption. The site became a visiting destination for journalism, law, and political science students from across the country, a permanent reminder of the risks faced by those who seek the truth at any cost. Mariana Goncalves, Sylvia's friend who became an investigative journalist, published an updated edition of her book, including a final chapter titled The 13th Box. In the introduction, she wrote, "When I began investigating my friend's stories, I never imagined I would spend my entire life pursuing this truth. As Sylvia used to say, some stories choose their tellers, not the other way around. The Paulo and Sylvia case, with its multiple layers of corruption, conspiracy, and cover-up, has become emblematic in Brazilian history. More than a crime of passion or motivated by immediate greed, it revealed itself as part of a complex system that intertwined political, economic, and media power, willing to eliminate any threat to its perpetuation. The discovery of the 13th box, almost 4 decades after the crime, served as a powerful reminder that, as the poet Carlos Drummond Andrade wrote, divided truth does not disappear. On the wall that hides her, frail, she makes scratches with charcoal, all half true, all half lie. Paulo and Sylvia's ultimate legacy transcended their tragic deaths. Instead of silencing a journalistic expose, the perpetrators ironically ended up creating one of the greatest symbols of the importance of investigative journalism and persistence in the search for truth in Brazil. In a ceremony held on September 17, 2024, the Brazilian Association of Investigative Journalism posthumously awarded Sylvia Regina Alves the Medal of Honor for Journalistic Merit, recognizing her as a pioneer and martyr of Brazilian investigative journalism. The medal was received by his mother Dulce, who declared in her speech, "The true mission of journalism is not just to inform, but to transform. My daughter knew this, even at such a young age. His legacy lives on in every reporter who refuses to accept lies, in every citizen who demands transparency, in every student who chooses truth over convenience." A plaque installed at the memorial reads the phrase from Sylvia's diary, which has become a mantra for generations of journalists. Some truths need to come to light, no matter the cost. If you enjoyed this impressive story, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and share it with anyone interested in real-life stories that change the history of our country. Remember, the search for truth never ends, and every story deserves to be told. Yeah,